We watched them meet online and fall in love. It was the foundation of their entire story, the bedrock of the Potthast family drama that has fueled season after season of 90 Day Fiancé. But what if I told you that foundation was built on quicksand? What if the serendipitous romance between Elizabeth Potthast and Andrei Castravet wasn't romance at all, but a cold, hard business transaction initiated by the one person no one would suspect? We have obtained what sources are claiming is a copy of a 10-year-old personal services contract between Chuck Potthast and Andrei Castravet. This isn't just a rumor. We are talking about clauses offering a green card and $500,000 in exchange for marrying his daughter. The controlling father narrative was a cover. The feuds were a distraction. The marriage was a job. Before we open this dossier and expose the darkest secret in the history of the 90 Day franchise, you need to hit that like button and subscribe to 90 Day Fiancé Universe right now. We are the only channel brave enough to dig into the insider reports that TLC doesn't want you to see. Turn on notifications because this investigation is ongoing, and you do not want to miss the updates. Let's go back to the beginning. To understand the magnitude of this deception, we have to re-examine the very first moments we were introduced to Libby and Andrei. Do you remember the tension? Do you remember Chuck's skepticism? We all bought into the narrative that Chuck was the overprotective American father terrified of the aggressive Eastern European boyfriend. It's a classic trope. It's relatable. And according to new information, it was an Academy Award-winning performance. Look at the early footage with fresh eyes. Notice how Chuck's opposition never actually stopped anything. He would complain, he would interrogate Andrei, he would huff and puff, but the checkbook always opened. We thought he was a pushover. We thought he was soft. But in reality, Chuck Potthast is a shark. He runs a property management empire. Men like Chuck don't get bullied into paying for lavish Moldovan weddings unless they are getting something in return. The behavior we saw wasn't a father being walked all over. It was an employer paying an invoice. To understand why Chuck would go to these lengths, we have to look at the Libby of 10 years ago. The narrative sold to us on the show is that Libby is the level-headed sister, the one caught between her crazy family and her stoic husband. But sources close to the Potthast family in Tampa paint a very different picture of Elizabeth's early 20s. Insider reports suggest that over a decade ago, Libby was in what the family called a red zone phase. She was allegedly partying hard, dating dangerous men, and drifting away from the family values and, more importantly, the family business. Chuck, a man obsessed with legacy and control, was terrified. He wasn't just worried about her safety, he was worried about her brand. He needed a way to rein her in, but he knew that if he tried to control her directly, she would rebel even harder. He needed a proxy. He needed a handler. This is where the story takes a turn into international intrigue. According to our exclusive theory, based on the documents we have reviewed, Chuck reached out to an international fixer. He wasn't looking for a hitman, he was looking for a husband. He needed a specific profile. He needed someone strong, traditional, physically intimidating, and financially motivated. He needed a man who could impose structure on Libby's life under the guise of being a protective, alpha partner. Enter Andrei Castravet. He was perfect. A former bouncer and police officer in Moldova, accustomed to hierarchy, looking for a way out of Eastern Europe, and willing to play the villain if the price was right. The story of them meeting on a dating app, a complete fabrication. A setup. It was a digital introduction orchestrated to look like fate. Think about it. What are the odds that a suburban girl from Tampa matches with a bouncer from Chisinau who just happens to be exactly the kind of disciplinarian her father thinks she needs? The mathematical probability is 0. The probability of it being a headhunting acquisition is 100%. The awkwardness we saw when they first met on camera wasn't the awkwardness of new love. It was the awkwardness of two people navigating a complex undercover operation. Andrei wasn't nervous about meeting the dad. He was nervous about meeting the boss. Now, let's talk about the smoking gun. We have received images of a document that changes everything. It is titled Personal Services Agreement, dated exactly 1 week before Libby and Andrei officially met online. The language in this contract is chilling. It doesn't use the word love. It uses the word compliance. One highlighted clause allegedly reads, "The contractor, identified as A. Castravet, agrees to enter into a legally binding marriage with E. Potthast for a minimum duration of 5 years." Another clause states, "The contractor will actively discourage E. Potthast from prior associations deemed detrimental by the client." The client is listed as a limited liability company registered to an address that traces directly back to one of Chuck's commercial properties. But the most damning piece of evidence isn't the text, it's the money trail. For years, fans have criticized Andrei for being a mooch. We've called him lazy. We've slammed him for demanding $100,000 for a wedding and asking Chuck for loans to start a business. We were looking at it all wrong. Those weren't loans. That wasn't charity. That was his salary. The contract reportedly stipulates a base stipend to be paid out in milestone bonuses to avoid raising suspicion with the IRS or immigration authorities. When Andrei demanded money for the wedding, he wasn't begging. He was collecting. When he asked for a cut of the house flipping business, he was negotiating a raise based on performance. He had successfully stabilized Libby, brought her into the family fold, and produced grandchildren. In his eyes, he had fulfilled the contract and deserved a promotion. This reframes the entire family dynamic. Think about the siblings, Charlie, Jen, and Beck. Why are they so venomously angry at Andrei? On the surface, it looks like jealousy. They claim he's taking their inheritance. But if you look deeper, their rage is too specific. They treat him with the disdain one reserves for a hired hand who has forgotten his place. Our theory is that the siblings know. They know Andrei is on the payroll. They know their father hired a babysitter for their sister, and they are furious that the babysitter is getting paid more than the biological children. Every time Charlie gets into a fight with Andrei, he's not fighting a brother-in-law. He's fighting a contractor who he believes is overstepping his job description. When Charlie screamed, "Get a job," at the wedding, it was a double entendre. He meant, stop pretending you're family when you're just an employee. Let's examine the alpha male persona Andrei adopted. Viewers have hated it. We've called it toxic, controlling, and misogynistic. But if you view it through the lens of this contract, it's a performance review. The contract allegedly required him to stabilize Libby. How do you stabilize a rebellious party girl? You implement strict rules. You isolate her from her old friends. You create an us against the world mentality. Andrei's controlling nature wasn't a personality flaw. It was a directive from Chuck. Chuck paid for the old-school husband package because he couldn't be the strict father himself. He outsourced the discipline. Every time Andrei told Libby not to do something, he was executing the terms of his agreement. And look at the real estate license arc. This was the moment the contract was supposed to evolve. The initial stabilization phase was over. Libby was a mother. She was working with her sisters. She was free. The contract likely had a clause for Andrei's integration into legitimate employment to finalize his green card status and wash the money. Chuck giving him a job in the flipping business was the final step in laundering the relationship. It explains why Chuck was so insistent on helping him despite the siblings' protests. Chuck wasn't being a blind optimist. He was a CEO managing a transition plan. He needed Andrei inside the business legally to justify the payments that had been going on under the table for years. There is a specific piece of evidence that insiders are pointing to: a wire transfer receipt. This document, which was leaked alongside the contract, shows a transfer of $25,000 from a shell corporation in Delaware to a bank account in Chisinau, Moldova. The date on the transfer is critical. It is dated 7 days before the digital footprint of Libby and Andrei's first interaction. Why would a shell company linked to Chuck Potthast be sending $25,000 to a random Moldovan account before his daughter even knew the man existed? There is no innocent explanation for that. That is a signing bonus. That is a retainer. That is the down payment on a human life. The psychological toll on Libby must be considered, although up until recently, we believed she was a victim of ignorance. The narrative we are building suggests she was the mark. She was the target of a conspiracy between her father and her husband. Imagine the gaslighting. Every argument, every reconciliation, every romantic moment was tainted by the fact that one person in the bed was on the clock. But here is where the story gets even darker. We have to look at the cracks in the armor. In recent seasons, Libby has seemed more exhausted, more cynical. She talks about starting her own thing, about singing, about getting away from the drama. Is this her subconscious realizing that her life is a cage built by her father? Let's go back to the contract's success bonus. The leaked pages mention a substantial payout upon the issuance of a permanent resident card, the green card. This explains the immense pressure Andrei put on Libby to process the paperwork. It wasn't just about citizenship, it was about the payout. It explains his agitation, his impatience with the system. He had a six-figure check waiting for him the moment that card arrived in the mail. And Chuck was sweating it too. Because if the green card was denied, the whole operation could be exposed. If Andrei got deported, he would have no reason to keep Chuck's secret. He could sell the story to the tabloids for a fortune. Chuck wasn't supporting the immigration process out of the goodness of his heart. He was protecting his investment and his reputation. The tension between Andrei and the family at the family reunions takes on a sinister light. Remember the Moldova wedding? The second wedding? The one Chuck paid for? The one that cost a fortune? That wasn't a wedding. That was a hush money payment to Andrei's family and friends back home to keep them quiet about the arrangement. It was a spectacle designed to create photographic evidence of a legitimate relationship for immigration purposes. Chuck looked miserable the entire time, not because of the cost, but because he was surrounded by people who he feared might know the truth. He was walking through a minefield in Chisinau, paying off everyone in sight to keep the charade going. We also need to talk about the relocation threat. Andrei constantly threatens to move Libby and the kids back to Moldova. We always saw this as a control tactic, a way to isolate Libby. But under the theory of the contract, this is a negotiation lever. When Andrei threatens to leave, he's telling Chuck, "Pay up or I take the product away." He knows Chuck's ultimate goal was to keep Libby close and under control. By threatening to remove her, Andrei is squeezing the boss for better terms. It's a labor dispute masked as a marital spat. And every time he threatens it, what happens? Chuck caves. Chuck offers more work, more opportunity, more money. It is a shakedown. The fascinating part of this insider theory is how it recontextualizes the villain edit. TLC loves a villain. Andrei is the perfect villain. But in this scenario, he's actually the most honest person in the room. In a twisted way, he is doing exactly what he was paid to do. He is fulfilling a contract. The real villain is Chuck, the puppet master who treated his daughter's heart like a distressed asset that needed management. Chuck Potthast, the man who smiles and cries about family unity, allegedly orchestrated a decade-long fraud to curate his daughter's life. It creates a Shakespearean tragedy in the suburbs of Tampa. Let's look at the timestamps on the leaked documents again. The contract duration was allegedly for 5 years initially, with an option to renew based on mutual satisfaction and the birth of heirs. The 5-year mark coincides perfectly with the escalation of drama within the family business. The contract was up for renegotiation. Andrei wanted equity. He wanted a piece of the pie, not just a salary. This is why he became so aggressive about partnering with Chuck. He felt he had earned his stripes. He had done the dirty work. He had tamed the rebellious daughter. Now he wanted to be a boss. The friction we saw wasn't just family bickering, it was corporate restructuring. We must also consider the role of the other sisters. Jen and Beck are constantly trying to expose Andrei, constantly digging into his past. Why? If they suspect the arrangement, they are trying to find proof to show Libby without implicating their father. Or perhaps they are trying to get Andrei fired. If they can prove he has a criminal past that voids the handler contract, they can get rid of him. Their obsession with his past in Moldova, the reasons he left the police force, is driven by a desire to find a breach of contract. They want him gone so they can reclaim their position as the favored children and stop the financial bleed from their father's accounts into Andrei's pocket. This theory also explains why Libby defends him so fiercely against her siblings, yet seems so tired. She is brainwashed. The handler technique is designed to make the subject dependent on the handler. By alienating her from her sisters, Andrei has made himself her only ally. It's a classic isolation tactic used in security and intelligence operations, applied here to a marriage. Chuck watches from the sidelines, wringing his hands, pretending to be the peacemaker, but secretly, he's pleased. As long as Libby is defending Andrei, she isn't reverting to her old wild ways. The system is working, but systems fail, contracts expire, and secrets, no matter how well paid for, have a way of leaking. The document we have described, with its specific clauses about discouraging associations and milestone payments, is a ticking time bomb. If this document is authentic, and our sources insist it is, it invalidates the marriage in the eyes of the law. It turns their life into a federal crime. Marriage fraud is a serious offense. Conspiracy to defraud the United States government is even worse. Chuck Potthast isn't just looking at family drama, he's looking at prison time. Andrei is looking at deportation. And Libby? She's looking at the realization that her entire adult life has been a lie manufactured by the two men she trusted most. This leads us to the most disturbing question of all. Does Libby know now? The source of the leak is the key. Who would have access to a 10-year-old contract kept in Chuck's private files? Andrei wouldn't leak it. It implicates him. Chuck wouldn't leak it. It destroys him. The siblings might, but they would risk taking down their father, the source of their own wealth. There is only one person who benefits from blowing this whole thing up, One person who might be desperate enough to burn the house down to find the exit, but we will get to that twist in a moment. First, let's analyze the visual evidence from the latest season through this lens. Look at Libby's eyes. The spark is gone. There is a resignation there. When she speaks about Andrei's ambitions, she sounds like she's reciting a script she no longer believes in. When she interacts with Chuck, there is a new coldness, a suspicion. Could it be that she found the contract? Could it be that she stumbled upon the wire transfer receipts while working in the office? The timeline of the leak suggests it came from inside the house. It wasn't a hacker, it was someone with physical access to the Potthast family safe. If we assume the love story was a work assignment, every scene from the last 5 years changes meaning. The christening of the baby, a deliverable. Family vacations, corporate retreats, the arguments about money, salary negotiations, the reality show itself, a marketing campaign to legitimize the fraud. By putting their lives on TV, they created the ultimate cover story. We can't be faking it. Look at how messy we are. But the mess was the camouflage. The best place to hide a conspiracy is in plain sight, amidst the chaos of a reality TV trash fire. No one looks for a sophisticated contract in a dumpster fire. But the dumpster fire is burning out of control. The leak of this personal services contract is the water hitting the grease. We are talking about a document that details a transaction of $500,000. $500,000. That is the price tag Chuck put on his daughter's freedom. It's a staggering sum, but for a man like Chuck, keeping his empire safe and his daughter managed was priceless. He paid for peace of mind, but he bought a decade of chaos. As we continue to dissect the ramifications of this bombshell, remember that in the world of 90 Day Fiancé, the truth is often stranger than the fiction they edit together. We have seen catfishes, we have seen scammers, we have seen delusional dreamers. But we have never seen a calculated, long-term corporate espionage operation disguised as a marriage. This isn't just bad romance, it is a crime thriller, and the evidence is mounting. The shell companies, the wire transfers, the timing of the meeting, the handler behavior. It all fits. It fits too well to be a coincidence. We are just scratching the surface of this investigation. The rabbit hole goes deeper. We haven't even touched on the legal fallout that is currently brewing behind the scenes at the Department of Homeland Security. We haven't discussed the frantic meetings happening at the Potthast compound right now as they try to spin this leak. And we haven't revealed the most shocking part of this report, the identity of the whistleblower, the person who sent the contract, the person who wants the world to know that the marriage was a lie. Prepare yourselves, because the next part of the story involves a betrayal so personal, it makes the family fights look like child's play. We are about to walk you through the internal collapse of the Potthast dynasty. The contract was just the beginning. The fallout is the end. The call is coming from inside the house. That is the only conclusion that fits the forensic evidence attached to this leak. We established that Chuck Potthast wouldn't leak the contract that incriminates him, and Andrei Castravet certainly wouldn't leak the document that guarantees his deportation. The jealous siblings, Charlie, Jen, and Beck, despite their hatred for Andrei, are financially tethered to Chuck's empire. If Chuck goes down for federal conspiracy, the family business creates a sinkhole that swallows their inheritances whole. They are petty, but they are not suicidal. That leaves one person with the access, the motive, and the desperation to light the match that burns the Potthast legacy to the ground. That person is Elizabeth Potthast Castravet. Sources indicate that the metadata on the scanned PDF of the personal services contract contains a digital fingerprint that traces back to a scanner located in the home office of the Potthast residence. Specifically, a scan initiated at 2:00 a.m. on a Tuesday, a night when social media posts confirm Andrei was out of town on a real estate scouting trip and Chuck was asleep. Libby was the only one with the opportunity. But why? Why would she destroy her own marriage and expose her father? To understand this, we have to step into the mind of a woman who has slowly realized that her entire adult reality is a fabrication. Imagine the horror of stumbling upon this document. Imagine looking for a birth certificate or a tax form in your father's safe, and instead finding a receipt for your husband. The internal betrayal theory suggests that Libby found this contract recently, perhaps within the last 6 months. It explains her sudden shift in demeanor on the show. It explains the dead look in her eyes. She read the clauses. She saw the price tag, $500,000. She realized that the fight for her affection between her dad and her husband was actually a negotiation over her maintenance fees. The realization didn't just break her heart, it trapped her. You might ask, why didn't she just file for divorce? This is where the contract gets truly diabolical. According to legal experts who have reviewed the leaked clauses, the agreement contains severe penalty clauses. There is allegedly a breach of contract stipulation that states if the marriage ends due to the actions of the protected subject, that's Libby, the financial penalties revert to the family trust. Essentially, if Libby leaves Andrei, Chuck legally owes Andrei a massive severance package, and the money comes out of Libby's share of the future inheritance. Furthermore, there are non-disclosure agreements binding all parties. If she simply divorced him and told the truth, she would be sued by her own father's shell company for millions. She was checkmated, she was a prisoner in a marriage designed by her father, with no exit door that didn't lead to financial ruin. So she did the only thing she could do. She chose the nuclear option. She leaked the contract anonymously. By putting this document into the public domain, she changes the game. She is banking on the force majeure of federal intervention. If the marriage is proven to be a fraud by the U.S. government, the contract becomes void. You cannot enforce a contract to commit a crime. If the FBI raids the business, the NDA is nullified. Libby isn't just a scorned wife. She is a whistleblower fighting for her freedom. She leaked it to blow up the jail cell her father built for her. She wants the feds to do what she couldn't, annul the marriage and destroy the business arrangement that bought her body and soul. This brings us to the escalating legal threat, and let me be clear. This is no longer a reality TV storyline. This is a federal case. Our insider reports confirm that U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services, the USCIS, has opened a full-scale investigation into the Castravet file. They are not taking this lightly. The love story we watched on TLC is now being reviewed by federal agents as video evidence of a conspiracy. Every inconsistent statement, every timeline discrepancy, and now this leaked contract is being compiled into a dossier labeled Operation Family Business. The potential charges here are terrifying. We are looking at a conspiracy to defraud the United States. Under federal law, marriage fraud carries a penalty of up to 5 years in prison and a fine of up to $250,000. But that's just for the fraud itself. If money crossed state lines, remember that wire transfer from Delaware? We are looking at wire fraud. We are potentially looking at money laundering charges if the flipping business was used to clean the payments made to Andrei. Chuck Potthast, the man who built an empire on rental properties, could see all of his assets seized by the government under civil forfeiture laws if they are proven to be the proceeds or instruments of a crime. For Andrei, the stakes are life and death, or at least life and deportation. Even if he has already received his permanent residency or citizenship, it is not bulletproof. If citizenship was obtained through fraud, it can be revoked through a process called denaturalization. The leaked contract is the smoking gun for material misrepresentation. If a judge sees a document where he agreed to marry for money before he even met the woman, his status is gone. He would be placed in removal proceedings immediately. And because this involves fraud, he would likely be permanently barred from ever re-entering the United States. He would be sent back to Moldova, humiliated, with nothing but the clothes on his back, leaving his children behind. And what about the children? This is the most tragic part of the conspiracy. If Libby and Andrei's marriage is deemed a sham by the federal government, it creates a chaotic legal battle for custody. Andrei, facing deportation, would likely fight to take the children to Moldova. Chuck, desperate to save face, would spend every last dime to keep them in America. Libby would be caught in the middle, the victim of her father's control and her husband's greed. The children become the collateral damage of a business deal gone wrong. The panic inside the Potthast family right now is palpable. Sources tell us that filming for the new season has been abruptly halted. The cameras have been shut off, not by TLC, but by Chuck's lawyers. They have likely advised everyone to stop speaking. The silence from the family on social media in the last 48 hours is deafening. Usually they are posting stories, clapping back at haters, promoting their OnlyFans. Now, radio silence. That is the silence of people who have been told by a criminal defense attorney to shut up or go to jail. We must also consider the role of the network. TLC is sitting on a powder keg. If they knew, if producers had any inkling that this marriage was a setup and they filmed it anyway, they could be subpoenaed. They could be accused of being accessories to the fraud. Reality TV production notes could be seized as evidence. The show that made them famous could be the evidence that convicts them. This is why we are seeing insider reports leaking now. It's possible that production staff, sensing the ship is sinking, are leaking information to distance themselves from the conspiracy. Let's look deeper at the psychological warfare Libby is now waging. If she is indeed the leaker, She is performing the greatest acting role of her life right now. She has to sit at the dinner table with Chuck and Andrei, pretending everything is normal, while waiting for the FBI to kick down the door. She has to play the dutiful wife and the loving daughter, all while knowing she pulled the pin on the grenade. It reframes every recent interaction. When she rolls her eyes at Andrei, it's not annoyance, it's contempt. When she sighs at Chuck, it's not exhaustion, it's hatred. She is counting down the days until the raid. She wants it to be over. She wants the truth to come out so she can finally say, I didn't know. I was the victim. That is her only defense strategy, plausible deniability. By leaking it anonymously, she sets herself up to be the shock survivor, not the co-conspirator. The detailed clauses in the contract regarding image maintenance are also fascinating. The contract allegedly demanded that Andrei maintain a specific physical appearance, the beard, the muscles, to fit the protector archetype Chuck desired. It demanded that he aggressively defend the family name. Think about the fistfight with Charlie. Was that real anger, or was Andrei fulfilling a contractual obligation to assert dominance within the family hierarchy as requested by Chuck? Chuck may have wanted someone to humble his son Charlie, who has his own history of issues. Andrei was the hired muscle brought in to straighten out the entire bloodline. The violence wasn't a loss of control, it was a fulfillment of duties. But the twist of Libby leaking the document adds a layer of feminist vengeance to the narrative. For years, men have controlled her life. Her father controlled her finances. Her husband controlled her movements. They passed her back and forth like a literal piece of property, with a bill of sale to prove it. This leak is her taking the power back. It is a burn-it-all-down moment. It is the actions of a woman who realizes that poverty and freedom are better than a golden cage built on lies. She is willing to lose the inheritance, lose the house, lose the reality TV fame, just to cut the strings that bind her to these two men. As we wait for the official press release from the Department of Justice, or the mugshots to drop on TMZ, we have to ask ourselves, how many other couples are like this? Is this the 90-day business model? But the Potthast case is unique because of the paper trail. Most scammers are smart enough to keep it verbal. Chuck Potthast, in his arrogance as a businessman, needed it in writing. He needed a contract because he didn't trust Andrei. He wanted legal recourse if the Moldovan employee ran off with the money without marrying the girl. His need for control, his need for a signature is what ultimately doomed him. He treated a human relationship like a property lease, and now he is facing eviction from his own life. The endgame is approaching. We expect to see legal motions filed within the week. We expect to see Andrei detained by ICE. We expect to see Chuck indicted. And standing amidst the rubble will be Libby, finally free, holding the match, watching the empire burn. The lie that started on a dating app 10 years ago has finally caught up with them. The transaction is closed, the bill is due, and the cost is everything they have. Was Chuck protecting his daughter or running her life? Is Andrei a con man or just an employee who did his job? And is Libby's leak a desperate cry for freedom or a calculated betrayal? Drop your verdict below. Do not forget to like this video to help the algorithm spread the truth, and subscribe to 90-Day Fiancé Universe. We will be the first to go live when the arrests happen. Stay tuned. The drama is just beginning.